All right, welcome to the August community call. Good to see everybody. I have a bunch of stuff to get through, and I will try to get through it as quickly as I can. So with the remaining time, as always, opening up the floor for anybody to talk about things that are top of mind from them. But I'm gonna, without further ado, go and share my screen. Can people see this?
Yep.
And is it too small? I'm gonna say hopefully not, but I'll do it. Control plus just in case. So in case you weren't aware, MSGraph, we have officially gone live on that. This has been out for a little bit now. The provider you can go and get from the Terraform registry, just like any other good old provider. And there's documentation. We have reference documentation, like, hey, how do I create an application registration? And all of this is essentially just some example usage that is auto-generated, kind of similar to what you see nowadays in AZ API if you've clicked over there recently. For those of you who haven't heard of this before, AZ API is to Azure RM as MSGraph is to Azure AD. In other words, the MSGraph provider is going to try to cover all the gaps that exist within the world of Entra. And also, it supports M365. So I was tinkering around with it, and I must confess, I am not an M365 expert, but I was able to work with some of my teammates and get a SharePoint site deployed. You can get things like Outlook notifications set up and all of that if you're interested. We just don't have necessarily full confidence in all of that. This is a preview provider, as you can see by the 0.1 version. So use at your own caution, but overall, we think this is going to be helpful, especially in some scenarios that you might be waiting for functionality within the Azure AD provider. With that change, we initially were going to create a VS Code extension for Graph, but then we doubled back and said, hey, why are we creating all these VS Code extensions? Why don't we just combine them all? So we've making the effort to consolidate everything that exists within Azure, within MSGraph, all of these VS Code functionalities into a single language server that serves as the Microsoft Terraform extension. So now you get access to functionality across Azure RM, AZ API, MSGraph, all at once. And you can see in the marketplace listing here how it kind of has a bunch of different features, including the paste and the migration to the AZ API provider. I will get there in a second. We also have on the actual graph documentation page some documentation regarding how to get started with MSGraph. And there's actually this page now, which essentially shows both Bicep and Terraform, because both have MSGraph providers. So all you need to do is just click over here and you'll get to the overview. Here's the quick start. And then here are the V1 and beta reference guides. So hope this is all helpful. Hope you all check it out and try to use it. We put in a lot of effort to getting this out, and hopefully it is unblocking you in different ways. PIM, other things are definitely top of mind for us with this first release. Our V next, if you will, right now is how are we going to really improve the resource action workflow. We don't have that right now, but there are certain things for some of you who might be more familiar with like global admin policies and stuff like that. Those might need to be spun up in a weird, more non-CRUD-like fashion. So things that you all might be working with anyways. Would welcome your feedback. Any questions about the new provider?
Maybe just some feedback, if I may.
Yep.
So yeah, we've been already using the new provider, and we really like it for the data sources, because, for example, if you use the Azure AD provider for groups, it also reads the members, even if you only need the ID, for example. So it's great for data sources already. But for resources, like you said, we are waiting for patch support, basically, to use it on updates for existing resources. Like we want to continue to use Azure AD Group for now, but we would like to use, or Azure AD Service Principal, but we would like to use the graph provider to set custom security attributes, for example. So I think this will be a very useful and important thing for a next version. But apart from that, yeah, I'm really looking forward to any new to this new provider.
Yeah. So I think it would probably be some sort of update action that you're waiting on, and we've heard that and already are actively working on it. I don't think this thing is going to GA or get close to GAing without that. So that will be something we'll be aiming for in Node.2. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect.
Any other feedback or questions? Okay. I'm going to keep things moving along. So I'm going to open up my trusty little editor. And just to make clear, this is the new extension. If you were to go to VS Code and you look up Microsoft Terraform, those of you who might have had the AZ API extension, there is a migration feature there that you can use. It's pretty sick and slick. We would recommend that you test this out and use it pretty much immediately. If you're using Azure M, if you're using AZ API, if you're on this call, you probably should be using this extension. And one of the features that we've started recently with this new provider is the ability to export resources. So I'm going to demo that real quick. Basically, what's going on here is that you can now go into the different subscriptions that your account in VS Code, which is authenticated, has access to, and then it'll show you, hey, here are the resources that you could export from, and you can pick a resource group, and then it can even tell you exactly what the resources contained within that resource group are. And you can always click, hey, I want to export it. You can select Azure M or AZ API. We have tried this scenario out, and it does feel like it's a pretty nice way to get things working, especially if you don't want to go to the portal and do click ops in that scenario. Nice thing here is all I would need to do to get this all working is, hey, I just need to uncomment out these import blocks, and then I could import the resources. So this does, if you aren't familiar with the export experience, it pins to a specific version. So if for some reason your environment is like a 3.x version or an older 4.x version, you may need to finick around with some of the different properties, but this is a pretty nice way to get started with different things that are going on in the Azure land and bringing them over to Terraform. Lutz, I think I saw that you raised your hand, but maybe you were clapping on accident. Okay, not a problem. Any questions about this functionality? Like I said before, definitely check out the provider if you haven't yet.
When it's doing that export that you just demonstrated through VS Code, is that effectively doing the same thing as if you went into the portal and clicked the export in the GUI?
Absolutely. It's not really trying to do anything different. There is an Azure Terraform resource provider nowadays. We don't really advertise it, but that is essentially what's working under the hood here, whether it's an API call within the VS Code extension, or it's actually within the Azure portal and making that call.
So it's just calling that endpoint on the resource group and it's exporting everything within?
More or less. What it's really doing is you can provide it a resource ID, or what you can do is you can recurse on the resource group. So from a backend logic standpoint, it's looking at all the resources within the resource group, and then it's doing a, let me export each of these things, and then let me also export the resource group as a resource itself. Then it does the explicit dependencies, although we are working on seeing if we can get more implicit dependencies. If you're noticing, these are a little bit noisy in terms of the number of properties that are being shown. That's because by default, we configure it to export all the configurable properties rather than just trying to reduce the noise. So sometimes these can end up being quite verbose, if you will. And you'll see, for example, here that there are some empty strings that it's even specifying in this flow.
Yeah, I've noticed as part of the Terraform provider schema commands that it doesn't give an option for, like, it doesn't expose the default value, so it's not really, it's not trivial to identify which ones could be omitted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those pain points that I think everybody's aware of. I posted on LinkedIn about this, and I think there was somebody who worked on a similar thing for Databricks, like the Databricks provider. And it's the same rules, I guess. It's a Terraform problem, more or less, rather than like something that is just unique to Azure Export or anything.
And when this is being done on the server, is Azure just writing the import blocks and running the generate config out command, or is it like being more in tune with the data that it has to generate it without going through the normal export flow?
My understanding, and I don't know all the idiosyncrasies, is that this is just a GET request against all the resource IDs that are being constructed. So there's sort of a search functionality that happens first, and that will sort of say, hey, get me all the resource IDs here and show me the response in terms of all their latest up-to-date information. That's what Terraform does anyway, whenever you do a Terraform plan or look at state. And then what it will do is it will essentially, the logic or the conversion mechanism that we have here converts all of that into Azure properties or AZ API properties, right? If I rerun it, it will do the exact same thing, but it'll do it for the AZ API provider. So same idea, it's just mapping ultimately.
Yeah.
And that's all that's really going on under the hood. So
because what I've noticed with some of my work on trying to export things is that if I have the JSON for a resource group that describes the name, the location, and the tags, and then I want to get that as Terraform, either I have to write the strings myself or I write the import block, which requires Terraform to do another GET request, even though I already have the info as JSON, which is kind of annoying.
yeah, exactly. It is the way that it is. I mean, there is plannable import as well, right? I think you're familiar with that. For those who aren't familiar, you can just essentially not have any of the code below these lines, and you could run these. And when you do a Terraform plan, it will generate some code as well, but that code is also not going to be as reliable. So there's a bunch of solutions that are all, in a sense, trying to do the same thing. Here's the AZ API for anybody who's curious. But this, as was, again, it comes down to how do you sort of deal with the different issues that exist today within this challenge of export.
So if I have a VM and that VM has an IP, then the attachment from one to the other is using like a string, like the raw ID of the IP string instead of like a data, like an attribute reference using the Terraform like variables.
Yeah, it's not that smart. It can't figure out how to exactly do those things unless we were to we could support that, but then we would essentially be supporting a fork of Azure that literally lists all the dependencies of all properties in existence, which you can imagine how expensive that would be to maintain and own.
Only
we've
slightly
looked
complicated.
into. Yeah, so we're trying to be a little smarter about how we're doing things. So we've looked into like, how can we perhaps flag these things in a more deterministic way? One thing that we're relatively confident on here is resource group name. Resource group name is generally a universal property in Azure. So we are like, okay, if you see resource group name, maybe you can replace that with a variable, maybe location too, but it just gets tricky, right? What does a customer actually universally want or not want? And you don't want to have a GUID where people need to click every single thing that they want to variabilize or not variabilize in the middle of exporting. I think if they really wanted to do that, they could just convert that themselves afterwards. Any other questions? So we are continuing to invest in the export experience. The next steps that we're kind of trying to take is how do we really help bring people from the portal into VS Code? So we don't have anything we can show today, but that is on the roadmap. We're looking into how we can improve the seamlessness between Azure and the portal into VS Code and really getting things deployed. properly. So welcome your feedback, welcome your thoughts. I'm looking at some of the comments. Sorry about that. Thanks for some of the people who have been covering for me in the chat. Have we figured out a way to automate graph access admin? That is something that I think is going to be part of the resource action. Jeffrey, I don't know if you've worked with the APIs over there, but if I remember correctly, the admin policy is created with the account itself. So there's no supported create or delete operation. That's like a golden goose scenario of like we need to essentially support CRUD, but with only read and update as operations. So it's a little bit weird, but it definitely is a scenario that we've heard about. Is that correct, my understanding of it? I don't know if anyone knows. Yep, we'll figure it out. We'll make sure, especially when you get to the scope of like global admin access, you really don't want to mess with things or break anything. So making sure that you don't trip over that is going to be pretty important. For the OAuth 2 permission grants that Dominic dropped in the chat, we do support that for the MSGraph provider. That is another thing that you could definitely play around with or try out if anybody is interested. So. All right. And as usual, the remainder of the time is for all of you. So what would you like to do?
For the permissions involved, given that there's a lot of cool stuff with PIM where I might have the ability to activate the permission to do something, but I don't have it active, is there a way to, I guess the end goal would be that it would be neat if Terraform would suggest or automatically be able to activate the PIM roles to complete a apply. And to get to that point would be a bit of work, but I think that'd be neat.
Yeah, it would be neat. Say that last part one more time.
So if I want to create a resource group, then that requires the resource group / create permission or whatever. And if I need to activate PIM to do that, then the first time I want to create that resource group, I would activate PIM for 30 minutes or whatever. And if I want to create a second resource group, then it would still be active the first time. Then that kind of applies to a bunch of different stuff. So it's like updating tags or whatever, or creating other kinds of resources. Then it's possible to enumerate the permissions that the user has, like the eligible permissions, and then seeing all that stuff. So it's like just the integration of it. I don't know that Terraform supports like a hook or something to do a check, but
I'm pretty confident that we support checking the user's permissions and all that goodness. Let me see if we can figure this out live. So
I know that it's possible to like enumerate them, like there is the APIs and even the Terraform data blocks to get those permissions, but I'm thinking that if I wanted to deploy a resource group, instead of having to use Terraform to declare the activation of the permission as part of the apply, it would be outside of the Terraform code, although I don't know if that's like, if I guess the intent is that you would have to activate the role, and doing that through Terraform is, I guess, the in-domain way to do it. But if the AZ API or the Azure RM provider wanted to be sneaky with it, they could activate it on the user's behalf just in time at the time of the apply.
So you're saying that you would want JIT embedded almost within the ethos of the provider, so that rather than me needing to spin it up and juggle those permissions, that it's almost handled on behalf of by the provider itself. Is that correct?
Yes, because if I have a eligible assignment for contributor and then someone else has a different eligible assignment for contributor, like the ID would be different, but the effective permission would be the same, then it would be tricky to write the code to activate the import or to like activate the PIM assignment just in time before the creation of the resource. So it's like I just wouldn't want to have to think about it, like having to write the Terraform code, because it's in theory something that could just be derived, saying that there's an eligible assignment and then having it be activated. So you can create and activate the assignments using Terraform, but instead of writing the code, I would think it'd be neat if it did it for you.
Yeah, I think the ask isn't can we do it, it's rather how do we almost abstract that complexity away.
Yes. So if there was a VS Code action that said, determine the privileges needed to apply this code, and then it could write that code for you, like write the import, or sorry, write the PIM activate code, because you can activate PIM with Terraform. Then you could have a function that takes a Terraform workspace and determines what PIM activations would be necessary for that apply to be completed, I guess.
Yeah, I think the complication with that, at least thinking about it from a high level, is a chicken and egg problem, because Terraform runs as a user.
Yeah.
So that user doesn't have permission to create the PIM rules to potentially for that user.
Yeah, that second layer underneath is kind of where it gets complicated. Like if the user is trying to spin up something that requires like global admin, for example, like what's stopping them, right? It needs to be something outside of Terraform or within Terraform, right? That has the right barriers or guardrails to prevent this stuff from spinning up and knocking over a bunch of things.
But there's the eligibility assignment is different. Like creating the eligibility assignment is different than activating the eligibility assignment. So I'm saying that there's already an existing eligibility, but it needs to be activated. So like when you go to the Azure portal and you click view IAM, view my roles, you can go to the PIM tab and click activate, and you have to give the justification stuff. That part, like the assignment has already been created, but you have to activate it. So I'm saying the activation part is what I would want to be automated in some fashion when I'm trying to apply some Terraform.
Fair point. Definitely something we can take back and think about.
Because one of the other examples I have for that is joining VNets together is like if we have a hub and spoke model where there's this hub VNet and we want to join a newly created other VNet to it, then there's a bunch of PIM activations that need to happen that aren't quite intuitive. Because if you were to activate contributor on the hub VNet you're trying to join to, it's insufficient because you get like one error that says you're missing privileges on the VNet, and then you activate PIM on just that VNet trying to like scope it as narrowly as possible. And then after that step, you find out, okay, you also need contributor on the network security group or whatever. So there's kind of this cascading thing where if it was able to try and detect when you are getting a missing privilege error, but you also have the eligibility that already exists, but it's not activated yet, then that's the part that I think would be valuable.
Makes sense. So Indu, I saw your hand was up. Did you have something you wanted to add? Okay. But yeah, it's an interesting problem for sure. Thank you for that. I just saw another topic come in from the chat. If we don't have anything else about this, Andrew, did you want to talk about it on the call?
Yeah, I can do. I'm not quite sure what the actual issue is. I guess that's my issue, is finding the issue. We currently have a customer that's trying to deploy around 20 Flex functions that all need like private networking, Cosmos access, all that sort of thing. But for some reason, doing this via Terraform, it just isn't working for some reason. Like, I've gone through like the Azure Verify modules, I've tried Azure RM, and then eventually just did it via the portal for one of them, and that seemed to resolve whatever it was complaining about. But it just seems identical, and it was more of a call for help for anyone with experience within flex functions, like who has experience deploying them via Terraform or such.
Anyone have experience with that one?
Not that specifically, but sometimes when all hope is lost, you can open the developer tools in the Azure portal and see what request is being done there, and then use AZ REST to do it that way, which isn't quite Terraform, but.
I did try looking kind of the resulting JSONs. Obviously, we're talking like 5, 6, 7 resources per each function here, because all like private endpoints and the storage and everything that it hooks up, which is it's fine, but it's trying to work out what in that maze of things it makes is different as such.
Have you tried setting the TF log variable to see exactly what request is failing?
So the Terraform succeeds. That's
Oh.
yeah. So it's a runtime error.
So the resource is deployed in a failed state,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's
So it's not failed state. Everything looks correct from kind of a resource point of view. It's more when we deploy our code, hitting the actual like code endpoints, just outright 500s and just never actually makes the function work, which is the extra annoying thing, because from the looks of Viper's portal, they're identical.
Maybe diagnostic logging and just dump everything could give some insight, but yeah, that's a tricky one.
Yeah. The extra complication where a lot of the functionality, it seems, in Flex functions, like, yeah, it's coming soon. It's like, okay. Yeah, I mean, I'll leave it in the chat, and if anyone who's not on the call gets back, that'll be appreciated.
No, thanks for bringing it up, Andrew. Sorry we couldn't be more of help. When in doubt, ask Copilot.
It says, what's a flex function?
Yeah. All right, other topics.
For, I guess, the Azure DevOps one, I don't know if that's quite in scope, but I think there's been some changes with the way the authentication works, so that instead of relying on a PAT, can now do OAuth or whatever for your user account. Is there a way to configure what account that uses? Because we have, like, if we have an admin account and a non-admin account, and we want to be logged into the portal with the admin account, but in DevOps with the non-admin account, then that seems to be causing some trouble there. So I was wondering if in the Azure DevOps Terraform provider, it would be possible to specify like a username or something that we'd prefer it use.
We just made that change, right? Where we try to unify the authentication.
I think so.
Yeah. So you're looking at that and saying, maybe I'm in a scenario where I want to use the admin for this part or these providers, but I want to use the user for these parts.
Yeah, it seems, because previously, if you didn't specify the PAT in an environment variable or like in the provider config, it just wouldn't work at all. But now I think that's probably still the case, but it would be interesting to see if the recent authentication changes would be able to make it to the provider as well.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. I don't necessarily know. We can take that piece of feedback and go back with the team and let them know, because I think we just saw that the mechanisms were disjointed, so we wanted to make sure that they were relatively the same, but now we're perhaps blocking you on that sort of scenario. How much pain is it for you to then have to like spin up another session essentially for when you're working in the ADO provider compared to just like
I guess the most the most pain is actually in the portal itself. Like if you're on dev.azure.com or whatever, and you're trying to create a personal access token, in the account switcher, if you use that to change accounts, it doesn't work. Like if you change from my user account to my admin account, it will drop you off at the like my profile page. And if you re-navigate back to the Pat creation screen, it will pretend as if you did not switch accounts. You have to log out of the other account for it to acknowledge that you want to be using the other one. So it's like switching accounts in the Azure DevOps website itself has some problems where it just refuses to do it unless you actually log out of the other one.
Got it. Yeah, it sounds annoying. And is that the only way you can make Pats right now with EDO in the dev.azure.com endpoint? I don't actually remember.
I don't know if there's like I don't think there's an Azure CLI way to create a PAT, which would of course require an existing authentication, which
Yep.
given the new login stuff might actually not be that bad. But
Yeah.
yeah, it seems like there's just a lot of change and be interesting if that could be looked at.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where you always want to make things secure and standardized, but figuring out how that works is always going to be fun across all these different pieces of the puzzle. Thanks for the feedback. We'll take it back. Christian.
Yes, so I would have a question regarding AZ API. So when we used Azure RM, we were using tools like Checkoff or Trivy to do some build time checks, like in the merge request and so on. Are there any plans to integrate or support something similar with AZ API? Like there is for Bicep and ARM, there's a PS rule posted in the chat, which gives you rules like you have to use this queue or storage account should not be public and things like that. Yeah, so I was just wondering if there's any plans to support some kind of build time policy checks for AZ API as well.
Yeah, that's a good call out. I think, to be honest, we've been kind of, leaning upon AVM and their initiative to kind of help us define well-architected framework. That I think they have a guide somewhere about that, but I don't know if there's necessarily like a direct place where you could perhaps grab like a linter and just run it against your AZ API configuration or anything like that. Definitely think it is worth looking into though. So thank you for bringing it up.
Yep,
Stephen, I would check with Zidja and get back to folks here. I know he's been doing a ton of work around that. And as you mentioned with the AVM, they are kind of moving towards AC API with AVM, and I know they're doing some of that checkoff type stuff around that. So
Yeah, Zidja is one of our team's developers who's also a Hashi ambassador and does a lot of stuff with AVM and other linting rules and all that goodness. So I'll reach out to him and I'll let you know if I hear anything, Christian.
Thank you.
Tony?
Would it be possible to get the export to Terraform on the Azure policy side of things? So the assignments and definitions?
Would love if we could have things outside of ARM, but I think anything that is not within Azure is a bit of a Wild West, at least in terms of like the control plane. So it'd be really great if we could directly convert things, but I don't even think it's that straightforward nowadays to write policies in Terraform, right? I could be wrong.
It's a bunch of JSON encode, basically.
Yeah, I think it'll be an uphill battle for something like that. You would almost need to like, I think it might be possible if we were to create a mechanism to convert policy things to Terraform, but again, that's just one of those things that we don't hear a lot of clamor about. There are always ongoing efforts, nothing that we can announce right now, but we are looking into how do we better incorporate policy into your Terraform day-to-day usage. So
Sweet.
Well, you know, just rewrite Azure so it supports OPA. You know, I'm sure
Arbitrary
it'll only take you, yeah, only take you, 5-10 minutes to be fine.
Mark, not to put you on the spot, but do you want to talk a bit about HashiConf? If not, I'm happy to talk about it as well.
Sure. I mean, I put kind of one of the big things in the chat here. We are sponsors of HashiConf again this year. We will have a group of folks there. We have across Microsoft, we have a few sessions. Stephen and Jingwei will be doing a session on kind of how some features and functionality that we're adding from an AI perspective. So excited about that session. That's on Thursday afternoon. A few other folks have sessions. Mark Tinderholt has a session. And then we have another hallway track. And Brendan Burns, who is our CVP, is going to be on stage with Armon during the second day keynote. So just a bunch of attendance there. We will have one-on-one meetings with customers. So if you're interested in talking to us as well as our kind of leadership, we're going to have some folks from our leadership there that would love to talk to you all and hear from you as well. So we will be sending a link out in the community in the next couple of weeks where you can sign up for those. And let us know kind of what your goal is of those meetings. Do you want to know about our roadmap? Do you want to give us feedback or any or all of the above? So we'll have that. And we're just looking forward to the event. It's always a good time to get and talk with you all. So
if you are going to be there, please don't be shy and let us know. We'd love to grab a lunch with you or just chat with you. Like Mark said, even if you don't have the time or aren't interested in a deep dive session, just saying hi is still great. Awesome. So to be clear, I know there's a question about the MSGraph documentation. There is a reference documentation under the learn.microsoft page. It's under /graph/templates/terraform/reference, which sounds like a lot. So to make it easier, I'm just going to point to this page. You can get right here from this under graph. If we go all the way back to graph, actually. So if you look up graph on Microsoft Learn, you'll scroll down a bit, you'll see IAC templates. And then over here, you'll see references for v1.0 reference and beta reference, as well as the overview article. And there's also a quick start article. We can support a lot more than this, but this is what we've chosen to publish for now to avoid too much noise. So if anything is missing, we definitely want to make sure that it's added to the reference documentation. So please let us know if you need a specific resource type to get shown. And for what it's worth, OAuth 2 is right here as well.
Are there plans to include this in the actual graph documentation? So if you look at one endpoint, you can see examples in HTTP, C#, and so on. And there could be just another tab for Terraform, for example, to have it right in the usage. Are there any plans for that?
So the main thing there is whether or not something is CRUD friendly, Christian. We would love to have everything just in the tabs. I think the main question is which of these things is actually supported and how are we going to verify that it's going to work from a usage perspective. So it would be wonderful if everything could work, but I think the main thing is to make sure that there's a proper life cycle to things. So
yeah, true. Thank you.
Good question, though. Jeffrey's asking about the Azure managed Redis issue. Looks like opening the issue real quickly. We are waiting for the API to fix, roll out a fix, and that seems due in another week or two. And then there's a final code review and merge. So sounds like a mid-September ETA, at least at the very minimal, mid-September, we could merge functionality. And given the amount of traction on that issue, I can't imagine that we're gonna try to delay. So in those situations, just to peel back the curtain a bit, when something is that high priority for the provider, all the engineers and PMs on both sides, sides being Microsoft and HashiCorp being the one side, which is trying to get functionality in, we are just waiting to let the functionality or the API or whatever the service is get ready to go in a sense, and then we try to get that stuff merged as quickly as possible. All right, other questions? OpenTofu, good question. Nothing has really changed from our side. We're still committed to essentially improving the Azure Terraform experience, and that's going to keep being the case. We think that you can be successful on anything that you think you can be successful on. So we are not making any official stances towards backing OpenTofu right now, but we are at the same time not saying like you cannot use it or you are forbidden from using it either. So feel free to keep working on what brings you the most success. And Mark, do you have anything you want to add there?
Just a caveat to that, we make sure that the provider works for HashiCorp's product, but if there's an issue with it working on OpenTofu, we're not going to guarantee that we can fix it. So that's just a caveat or a word of warning there. So
yeah, I think that's the kind of general message I'm getting when we're looking at this. It's just difficult. We're trying to do the right thing by the business, but obviously the only offering that supports native Terraform is Terraform Cloud. Every other IEC platform is really pushing OpenTofu. So yeah, as I said, just trying to do the right thing. So we're just collecting information to inform the decision at the moment.
yeah,
Kind of from a risk point of view, I think we're kind of cornered with that as a business.
it's fair. And to be clear, we haven't heard any issues. So from a compatibility perspective, I have not heard a single customer say that they have an issue using the Azure or the AZ API provider using or with OpenTofu. But it's just one of those things that we don't test it and we don't have any plans to test it. So if there's an issue, it's kind of not something we're going to prioritize to fix. And we definitely won't fix it if it's only an issue in OpenTofu. So
Okay, cool. Thanks, guys.
The only thing that sometimes happens there I'm aware of is when we like publish a new release, maybe there's like some sort of weird mismatch on the release binary or something along those lines that breaks Tofu customers, but that usually gets fixed pretty quickly once it gets flagged for AZ API.
Cool.
All right, other topics? Jeffrey.
Hey there, I had a question on AKS. I could try to find the announcement, but they've been doing a bunch of work regarding adding and changing kind of the structure of the AKS extensions. I'm not sure if I've seen some things like this morning. There was a video about Bitnami Marketplace functionality, but I'm not sure if you're aware of if we can deploy extensions from the marketplace into AKS using Terraform. They walk through it using the UI. I didn't see anything in the documentation, but I'm not sure if you're familiar with that project. So the example they gave was like using the Bitnami chart to install RabbitMQ from the marketplace. But from an automation perspective, we do a lot of work where we deploy extensions using Azure RM.
Sorry, I just had my computer blow up on me while you're talking, Jeffrey. I'm reading the transcript here. Are you looking for some support or integration from a Azure M with AKS perspective?
Yeah, it's more of a question if you're aware if those marketplace extensions, if there's something that can be deployed with Terraform, if you've heard or any work that you've done, maybe looking at that API.
I'm not aware of it, but we'd have to see if it is actually exposed in the API. And if there's not an issue for that, I would suggest creating an issue on the repo, and we can look into it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as there's support from an API perspective, there's no reason we can't support it.
Yeah, it looks like from the provider link, it may actually be already supported. So that's good. All right. Thanks.
Yep, of course. Looks like there is the extension resource. Any other topics? Okay, with a couple minutes that I have here, I'm gonna just try to, because I realized I forgot to do this. I did want to show a little bit of what it looks like to do some authoring with the new MSGraph extension. So if you were to type in MSGraph, you can just see right here all the different things that you could create. You can also go right in here and get a snippet preview, which is nice. But as long as you just click one of these, it'll go ahead and give you information based off of the scenario that you're looking for. It's pretty helpful to get started. This is pretty much what's in the reference documentation within MSLearn anyway. And the same thing exists for AZ API, for Azure RM, and for AVM, all these different AVM resources as well. So we have a bunch of different things embedded within this extension to help you with authoring. So definitely recommend that all of you check it out in terms of IntelliSense, in terms of all of that. So hope that helps you as you work with the first version of the MSGraph provider. All right, any last topics? Going once, going twice. All right, thank you everybody for coming out today. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your August, and hopefully we'll see a lot of you, or at least some of you, in SF in September. If not, we'll see you online for the next version of this call. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
All right, thank you, Stephen.
Cheers,
Thank
David.
you.
Bye.